Well, Sultan al-Khulaifi is a senior researcher at the Centre for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. That's a think tank in Qatar. He joins me here. Thank you so much for being with us, Sultan. Before we get to the latest incidents in the Strait of Hormuz and in the territorial waters in Qatar, we've heard that Iran has responded to the latest US proposal. What do you make of that, and especially the timing of it, given it comes, hours after we've seen all of these incidents in the Gulf?
I think this is the awaited, response from Iran on the proposal that was sent by the Pakistani mediator. In terms of the Iranian response, what Axios has revealed last week is that there has been a little bit of bridging of positions between both sides. The Iranians might respond to some American demands in terms of giving assurances on the use of nuclear facilities, but they're not willing to destroy or to take away any enriched uranium outside of Iran, at least at the moment. The negotiations are still ongoing. In terms of the attacks that happened today, I think it's a way for Iran to continue putting pressure on oil markets and also on the Gulf states and the Americans to show that they do not want the ceasefire to continue putting pressure on Iran and its own economy. They want continue to pressure on both sides, but this is unaccepted by the Gulf states and the world. I think in terms of building confidence for the future, that will take a lot of time to build up, especially with these continued attacks on Gulf states.
Like you say, this is all seemingly about pressure. Is there a fear that Iran is willing to further degrade its relationship with GCC countries?
I think that fear is there, but I think also for Iran, in terms of any end of the war proposal, they will need to sit down with the Gulf states and with the region as a whole. So in terms of that relationship, and having that geographical neighbor being there all the time, you don't want to lose relationships with them, especially that there is a big Iranian diaspora in the region. So in terms of looking further, rather than just at the direct self-interest that's happening at the decision-making of Iranian regime, there should be a pathway to build relations between both sides.
Okay, just want to bring in the Qatar's response. They've condemned the drone attack on a commercial cargo ship. The Foreign Ministry said this attack is a blatant violation of the principle of freedom of navigation and the provisions of international law, and a dangerous and unacceptable escalation that threatens the security and safety of maritime trade routes and vital supplies in the region. The ministry says targeting commercial and civilian vessels, regardless of who is responsible, constitutes a grave breach of international law and poses a direct threat to regional and international security and stability. Well, I want to bring in Abbas Aslani, a senior research fellow at the Centre for Middle East Strategic Studies. He joins us now from Tehran. How will that message of condemnation from Qatar, how will that play there, and will that change anything from an Iranian perspective?
Well, I think the Iranian position has been, critical about the regional countries for hosting the U.S. forces and bases and, providing them with the logistics. And now at the time that we're seeing a ceasefire, I think now is the time for the Iran and regional countries to somehow leave behind those difficulties and somehow try in direction of repairing the ties, because when this is over, I think they will be needing to somehow work together to secure and guarantee a lasting peace in the region, because any insecurity in the region will be to the detriment of the all sides, including Iran and neighboring countries.
Right, just on that, repairing ties, Sultan, I mean, how difficult is that going to be whenever this is all over?
I think it would be very difficult because the precedent that has been set already with the war has already had a big blow to the relationship between both sides. But in terms of rebuilding the relationship, I think there will be a need for costly signaling from the Iranian side in terms of giving the Gulf states, but also other states like Iraq, Syria, and other countries in the region, that the Iranians are really looking for a rebuild of relationship between both sides.
Abbas, we've also heard in the last hour or so that Iran has handed over its response to Pakistani mediators on the latest US proposal. The negotiations, we understand, will focus on ending the war in the region. From an Iranian point of view, what does that actually look like, though?
Well, Iran was reviewing the U.S. proposed text that was recently submitted to Tehran, and they have just responded to the U.S. via Pakistani mediator. I think if the intent is there by the U.S. to reach a kind of potential agreement, I think we might be expecting a new round of negotiations between the two sides. But all the developments are not just limited to the diplomatic engagements. We are seeing that in the region, particularly in the Strait of Hormuz, there has been some back and forth between the two sides, which is impacting the atmosphere of the talks. This is making Iran hesitant about the U.S. intentions, given their military posture and they're intensifying their presence in the region. The question remains that among this dual track, meaning the diplomatic one and a military escalation, which one is the real objective of the United States? And if that's to engage with Iran diplomatically, I think we might be expecting a potential agreement on peace in the region, then moving toward further discussions on nuclear-related and sanctions-lifting-related discussions. But as I said, the developments in the Strait of Hormuz is raising a serious question that whether those developments will allow the diplomatic, course to proceed in a positive, atmosphere, or it will be clouding the discussions in a way that the progress will be hindered as a result of external elements.
Right. Talking of hindering progress, potentially, many believe that Iran will want to maintain some measure of control of the traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. From the GCC point of view, how unacceptable is that?
Just commenting on any potential deal between the US and Iran, I think any potential deal right now is going to be a preliminary deal. So it will agree on a set of principles, but it will leave the main details to be negotiated in the future. And this might be also a point of difficulty in the future, because the deferral of main topics to another period, it will open the way for spoilers to hurt any potential deal. And in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, I think the Gulf states' position has been very clear from the beginning that the Strait of Hormuz should be an international waterway that is not used for bargaining or for pressure by any side. I think also it's in the interest of the Iranian side not to keep using the Strait of Hormuz as a card against the whole world, because that card, as long as it is being kept used in the future, more countries will try to diversify their potential trade routes away from the Strait of Hormuz, and that will hurt Iran and will hurt the region.
Yeah, everyone wanting to come up with a plan B in case this would ever happen again. Abbas, we also heard the Qatari Prime Minister said that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, or using it as a bargaining chip, as Sultan was describing, is only going to deepen the crisis. But isn't that Iran's #1 strategy at this point in time?
Well, Iran proposed reopening the strait and lifting the U.S. naval blockade and ending the war some time ago, but the United States, they somehow resorted to provocative actions in the Strait of Hormuz. And because I think the battle on how to end the war and set the conclusion terms yet continues. The United States, what it seems that they are seeking to have a, let's say, capitulation from the Iranian side. And that's why I think Iran has not been yielding to that pressure, and we're seeing that an agreement is not in place. But I think if they come back at the negotiating table, the reopening can happen as fast as possible. And I think any peace agreement can benefit Iran, the US, and the whole region. And the Strait of Hormuz can reopen fully, and the tankers and vessels can transit the waterway. But the point is that the actions which are taking place in parallel might be suggesting that the two sides have been losing hope toward that diplomatic track. But through the exchange of messages or texts, which has been happening in the past few days now, Iran responding to the U.S., we have to be waiting to see the U.S. reaction. And if they somehow react to this positively, we might be, hoping for a potential new round of negotiations. The two sides reconvene somewhere and to somehow continue the discussions, which I think will be the best solution to make sure that the strait will reopen. We have been seeing that the economic pressure, military pressure, or even attacks have not forced Iran to reopen the waterway. So it seems that the only possible solution is the diplomatic track.
Okay. Finally, Sultan, we saw the Qatari Prime Minister speak with Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State. How important is it that the Gulf countries actually have a say here in the long-term future and potentially work as mediators, or do they have too much of a vested interest in it, do you think?
I think it comes as part of bilateral relations between Qatar and the US, but also in terms of the Gulf states' position. The continuous discussion with the Pakistani mediator on the deal and the future of the region shows that the Gulf states are really invested in the peaceful reinstitution of the region. But in terms of the mediation, I think the Gulf states as a whole continue to support the Pakistani mediation. The Pakistani mediation was successful in terms of bringing both sides to a first face-to-face meeting between each other, which is a big advancement in the relationship between the current contenders in the war.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there, but Sultan al-Khulaifi, we do appreciate your time as well as yours, Abbas Aslani, for us in Tehran.